Do you know what the heaviest sound in war is? It's not artillery, not the scream of incoming mortars or the rattle of machine gun fire tearing through a tree line. It's not even the wet thud of a body hitting frozen ground. The heaviest sound in war is silence, the kind that comes right after something breaks that was never supposed to break, the kind that makes 5,000 men hold their breath at the same time, 3 miles apart, without knowing why. November 17th, 1944, 1400 hours. Hurtgen Forest. Somewhere along the bleeding edge where France stops pretending and Germany begins. 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Rain for 72 hours straight. The kind of cold wet that doesn't just soak through your uniform, but settles into your bones like it's planning to stay there forever. Private Leo Brennan was 19 years old and looked younger. Farm boy from Iowa. Smooth face that had never needed a razor. Hands that shook when he gripped the steering wheel too long. He'd been driving the lead GMCCC KW 2.5-ton truck for 6 hours through what used to be a road and was now a river of chocolate-colored sludge. The windshield wipers couldn't keep up. The defroster had quit an hour ago. Bird, that's what everyone called him, on account of how he looked ready to fly away at the first loud noise, was hunched forward, squinting through a porthole he'd cleared with his sleeve, trying to see anything beyond the next 10 feet. The mud wasn't just mud. It was alive. It had weight. It had intention. Every revolution of the tires felt like the truck was trying to pull itself out of quicksand, and the quicksand was winning. Bird felt it before he heard it. A vibration that wasn't right. A shudder that ran up through the floorboards, through the seat, up his spine. The kind of feeling you get right before lightning strikes close enough to taste. Then the sound. Crack. Not a crack like a branch breaking, a crack like a cannon bone snapping. Metal on metal, but wrong. Final. The rear of the truck dropped 4 inches. The engine screamed, free and wild, no longer connected to anything that mattered. The RPM needle slammed into the red as the wheels spun uselessly, churning mud 40 feet into the air behind them. Bird's boot came off the accelerator. Silence rushed in. Just the hiss of the radiator, the patter of rain on canvas, the heavy breathing of men who knew, without being told, that something very bad had just happened. Behind him, 11 more trucks sat idling in a line that stretched back into the fog, a convoy that had just become a graveyard. Master Sergeant Jack Kowalski stood knee-deep in the mud beside the crippled truck, water running off the brim of his helmet in a steady stream. He wasn't looking at the truck. He was listening to it. 52 years old. Stocky build gone thick around the middle but still solid underneath. Hands like oak stumps, permanently stained black around the fingernails from 3 decades of working on engines that didn't want to be worked on. They called him Hammer, not because he was loud or aggressive, but because when Hammer looked at a broken machine, the machine understood it was going to get fixed or get destroyed. There was no third option. Right now, Hammer wasn't fixing anything. He was conducting an autopsy. He walked slowly around the rear of the GMC, boots making wet, sucking sounds with each step. The convoy's other men watched from their cabs, waiting for the verdict they already knew. The rear axle had snapped clean through. Hammer squatted down, ignoring the cold seep of water into his already soaked trousers. He ran one thick finger along the fracture line. The metal was still hot, almost smoking in the freezing air. Then he saw something that made his jaw tighten. On the underside of the brake, barely visible through the mud, were score marks. Deliberate. Someone had taken a hacksaw to this axle. Not enough to make it fail immediately, but enough to create a weak point that would give way under stress. Sabotage. Hammer's mind raced. Who? When? A German agent in the motor pool? A disgruntled soldier? The marks were at least a week old, rusted over. This had been planned. But there was no time to investigate, no time for anything except survival. He stood slowly, his face giving nothing away. Telling the others about sabotage would only create panic and paranoia. Right now, they needed focus. Sergeant Kowalski? The voice came from above, clipped and precise. Captain Bradford Hayes stood on a flat piece of ground 15 feet away, the only dry spot in sight. 28 years old, Yale educated, uniform pressed despite 3 days of rain. Hayes wore white dress gloves in the Hürtgen forest in November. They were stained now, but he refused to take them off. To him, the gloves meant civilization, order. To Hammer, they were a lie. Name's Kowalski, sir. Yes, what is the status? Dead. Differential housing cracked. Axle sheared. This truck isn't going anywhere, we don't carry it. That's impossible. I followed field manual specifications exactly. Steady throttle application maintains. The manual was written by men who never saw mud like this. Hammer's voice was low, a rumble from somewhere deep. You kept the throttle down after I warned you. Heat expansion inside, ice contraction outside. Physics doesn't read manuals. Hayes's face went from pale to red. His jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. We have a schedule, Sergeant. The 101st Airborne is 12 miles northeast. They are out of ammunition. They are expecting... The radio crackled to life. Static, then a voice thin and desperate. Any convoy, this is Eagle Actual. We are black on ammo. Repeat, black on small arms ammunition. German armor spotted. We need resupply within 14 hours or we will be overrun. Over. The voice died. Static filled the silence. Nobody moved. Hayes looked at his watch, then at the sky, darkening toward evening, then at the broken truck. How long to repair? Hammer shook his head. Can't repair this. We'd need a new axle, a crane, a machine shop. We'd need things that don't exist for 50 miles. Then we call for recovery vehicles. Recovery's 4 days out minimum. Hayes opened his mouth, closed it. In that moment, something in his face changed. Not surrender, recognition. The recognition that his world of regulations had just collided with reality, and reality was winning. Then what do you suggest? Hammer looked past Hayes, into the dark wall of destroyed trees. His eyes narrowed. I suggest we stop following rules and start surviving. Staff Sergeant Vincent O'Malley sat in the second truck, smoking a cigarette rolled from tobacco so stale it tasted like burnt rope. 34 years old, wiry build, Boston Irish, with a face that looked permanently worried. He was worried. Vinny had a wife, Mary, 2 little girls back in Massachusetts, Mary Jr. and Catherine, who didn't know their father was sitting in a metal box in the worst forest in Europe, watching their future evaporate. He'd written Mary a letter that morning, told her about the rain, told her he missed her pot roast, told her he'd be home for Christmas, which was a lie, but what else do you write? The letter was still in his pocket, unfinished. He'd run out of lies. Bird appeared at Vinny's window, rain streaming down his young face. Hammer wants you up front. The 3 of them stood in a loose circle beside the dead truck. Hayes had retreated to write notes in his ever-present field manual. Hammer spoke first, voice low enough that only they could hear. There's a Luftwaffe airfield 3 clicks east. Abandoned. I saw it in recon photos. Vinny frowned. So what? They've got equipment. Me-262 jet fighters. Those planes weigh 7 tons and land at 100 miles per hour on grass runways. Hammer paused. You know what kind of tires you need for that? Bird's eyes widened slightly. Wide ones. 18 inches wide, 10-ply sidewalls, smooth tread designed to distribute weight without sinking. Hammer looked at both of them. Physics doesn't care what flag you salute. Wide tire equals flotation. That's science. Vinny stared at him for a long moment. You want to put aeroplane wheels on a truck. I want to put science on a truck. Captain won't allow it, Vinny said. Looting enemy equipment is Article 32, court-martial offense. 5,000 men are about to die because we're sitting here following rules. Hammer's voice hardened. I don't give a damn about Article 32. Before Vinny could respond, a sound cut through the rain. A low crump, maybe 2 miles away. Then another, closer, mortar fire. The radio crackled again. All units, this is Division. Enemy panzer movement confirmed. 101st Airborne now has 10 hours, repeat, 10 hours until contact. Supply must arrive by midnight. 10 hours, not 14. Hammer turned and started walking toward Hayes. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. Hayes quoted regulations. Hammer quoted physics. Hayes mentioned court-martial. Hammer mentioned 5,000 dead Americans. Then Hayes looked at his watch, looked at the broken truck, looked at his white gloves. He pulled them off, slowly, deliberately, dropped them in the mud. 10 hours, Sergeant Kowalski. His voice was different now, smaller. Bring me a solution. Hammer nodded once. Bird, Vinny, weapons, light packs, we move in 5. As they gathered gear, another mortar round landed, closer this time, close enough that Hayes flinched and grabbed his arm. When he pulled his hand away, there was blood. Shrapnel from a shell fragment had sliced through his uniform, opening a 3-inch gash.
Captain,
Bird started. It's nothing. But Hayes's face had gone pale. Go, get the parts. That's an order. Hammer helped bandage the wound quickly. The shrapnel had gone deeper than Hayes admitted. The captain wouldn't be going anywhere soon, which meant when they came back, there would only be 3 men to make the run to the 101st. Hammer shouldered his pack and started walking toward the dark tree line. Behind him, Hayes sat down heavily on his rock, one hand pressed to his bleeding arm, the white gloves dissolving in the brown water beside him. The forest swallowed them in seconds. The forest between the convoy and the airfield was a graveyard that hadn't finished burying its dead. Every tree was a blackened stick. The ground was a maze of shell craters filled with icy water, barbed wire tangles, and things Bird didn't want to think about. The air smelled different here. Not just rain and mud, cordite, old smoke, the metallic tang that meant men had died here recently. Hammer moved like he'd done this before, low, steady. Bird tried to copy his movements, but felt clumsy, exposed. Vinny brought up the rear, carbine at his shoulder, eyes scanning. Every shadow looked like an SS trooper. They moved in silence. 1 click, 2. Then they saw it. The airfield. A strip of bomb-cratered concrete, maybe 2,000 feet long. 3 hangars, 2 collapsed, 1 still standing but leaning. Shell casings everywhere. Papers blowing across the tarmac like tumbleweeds. The Luftwaffe had left in a hurry. Hammer held up a fist. They stopped. They moved to the intact hangar's edge, using rubble for cover. The massive sliding doors were jammed halfway open. Hammer slipped inside first. Bird followed, carbine raised, heart hammering. The inside of the hangar was cold, colder than outside, the kind of cold that comes from absence. And there it was. In the center, under a partially pulled canvas tarp, sat a machine that looked like it had been built by someone from the future. Messerschmitt Me-262, jet fighter. No propellers, just 2 long engine pods slung under swept wings, smooth and predatory as a shark. Hammer walked toward it slowly, reverently. He knelt beside the landing gear. The wheels were massive, 18 inches wide, smooth black rubber with just a few deep grooves. The tire sidewalls were thick, reinforced. Hammer put one hand on the tire. Pushed. It barely flexed. Look at this. Bird and Vinny came closer. 10-ply construction, steel belted. These things are built to survive impacts that would shred a truck tire. He stood up. This is the answer. Vinny shook his head. Hammer, the bolt pattern's all wrong. You can't just swap these. Different threading, different hub diameter. Hammer smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. I'm not swapping wheels. I'm taking the whole damn leg. Metal surgery. Bird's eyes went wide. Cut the axle off the plane and weld it onto the truck. Make a hybrid. That's not possible. German engineering, American steel, they're incompatible. Different metallurgy. You weld those together and the joint'll crack. Then I'll weld it right. Hammer's voice was steel. The only thing that matters in mud is pounds per square inch. Standard tire, 8-inch width, carrying 2,000 pounds. That's 250 psi hitting the ground. Cuts through mud like a knife through butter. But this tire, 18 inches wide, same 2,000 pounds, that's only 111 psi. It floats. Same physics as snowshoes. You're not lighter, you're smarter. He looked at both of them. I need 3 hours. Oxyacetylene torch, reinforcement plates, and your backs. The radio on Vinny's belt crackled, faint. Eagle actual, 9 hours remaining. Static swallowed the rest. Bird looked at the ME-262, looked at Hammer, looked at his own shaking hands. What do you need me to do? They found the torch in a corner maintenance bay, full tank. Hammer dragged the equipment toward the aircraft. The sound of metal scraping on concrete echoed like a warning bell. The ME-262's landing gear strut was thicker than expected. German engineering, overbuilt, made it harder to cut. Also made it perfect for what came next. How much longer? Vinny called from the door. Hammer didn't answer. The torch was screaming. He adjusted the oxygen mix, narrowed the flame, and pushed through the last inch of strut. The landing gear assembly dropped free with a sound like a bell tolling. 400 pounds of German engineering hit the concrete and bounced once. Hammer killed the torch. Silence flooded back. The wheel assembly was beautiful in its brutality. 18-inch tire mounted on a hub that looked machined by obsessive craftsmen. The strut itself was hollow, chromoly steel, thick-walled. Jesus, Vinny breathed. That thing weighs more than my wife. Your wife's a saint. Hammer knelt, running fingers along the strut's interior. This is hollow. Good. We can sleeve the GMC axle shaft inside it. Different diameters, different materials, the heat expansion rates are different. I know. Hammer pulled out a ruler. Steel expands 12 micrometers per meter per degree Celsius. Chrome moly expands 11. At 1,000-degree weld temp, that's a 12-millimeter difference on a 1-meter joint. You force them to be the same, they crack. He looked at Vinny. My old man welded Liberty ships in '42, told me about joining different steel grades. You don't force them to match. You let them be different, but make them work together. 3-layer weld. Inner structural, middle load-bearing, outer seal. Each layer can expand at its own rate without cracking the others. Vinny stared. Where'd you learn that? From a man who understood that metal has memory. You heat it wrong, it remembers. Cracks later. They worked like ants carrying a prize 10 times their size. The wheel assembly fought them, nearly crushed Bird's foot twice. But they got it outside, through the mud, back to where they'd hidden the crippled GMC. 1,800 hours. 2 hours since they'd left. 8 hours until midnight. Hammer looked at the gap between impossible and necessary. Get the rear end up on blocks. They worked in gathering darkness, no lights except the torch when needed. The forest was alive with sounds that might be wind and might be patrols. Bird found blocks from a destroyed farmhouse. They jacked the GMC's rear up until the broken axle hung free. Hammer measured. GMC axle shaft, 3 inches diameter. ME-262 strut. Inner diameter, 3¼ inches. Close. A quarter inch might as well be a mile. We build up the axle shaft. Hammer held up a strip of flat steel scavenged from the hangar. Wrap this around in a spiral. Tack weld every 2 inches. Build up the diameter until it's a friction fit. That'll take hours. Then we better start. Temperature dropping. 32 degrees. Freezing. Hammer struck the torch. The flame lit his face from below, turning him into something carved from granite. He began wrapping steel around the axle shaft, tack welding as he went, building diameter millimeter by millimeter. Sparks showered down like dying fireflies. The smell was ozone and burning steel, overlaid with Hammer's sweat and wet wool steaming in torch heat. Bird watched like a student watching a master. Every movement deliberate, no wasted motion. Hammer didn't fight the metal. He listened to it. An hour passed, then another. 15 hours. 7 hours to midnight. The axle shaft now had a built-up sleeve, rough but solid. Hammer measured, 3¼ inches. Perfect. He slid the ME-262 strut over the American axle. Metal on metal, grinding. It fought, resisted. Then it seated. Different nations, different engineering, forced into marriage by necessity. Now the hard part. Full penetration weld, 3 layers, Too much heat, and the dissimilar metals would crack cooling. Too little, and it would fail under load. Hammer adjusted to a softer flame, started laying the first bead. The weld pool glowed orange, then yellow, then white. Hammer worked it like a painter, adding rod, building up the joint, watching heat spread. First layer done. He waited for it to cool. Bird brought canteen water, poured it carefully. Steam hissed like angry ghosts. Second layer. Faster now, more confident. The metal was talking. Third layer. Outer seal. Had to be perfect. Hammer's hands were steady despite the cold. Decades of muscle memory. The torch became an extension of his arm. Done. The weld looked ugly, brutal, like scar tissue on a wound that healed wrong but healed anyway. They mounted the wheel, bolted the strut using reinforcement plates, did the same to the other side with the second wheel. By 1925 hours, the truck sat on blocks with two massive aircraft tires where American wheels used to be. It looked wrong, alien, like something built during a fever dream. Lower it. They pulled the blocks. The GMC settled onto its new feet. The wide tires stuck out past the body by nearly a foot, made the whole thing look squat, aggressive. Hammer walked around slowly, checking every weld, every bolt, looking for failure. Start her up. Bird climbed into the cab. His hand shook, reaching for the ignition. He pumped the gas, turned the key. The engine coughed, caught, roared to life. The sound echoed through the dead forest like resurrection. Rev it! Bird gave it gas. The engine climbed. 1,000 RPM, 1,500, 2,000. The rear wheels began to turn, spinning smooth and true, the welds holding. Put her in gear, low range, easy. Bird worked the shifter, found first, eased the clutch out. The truck lurched forward. The tires bit into mud. The wide surface area distributed weight exactly as calculated. Instead of cutting down, they floated on top. The truck moved. 5 feet, 10, 15. Then Hammer heard it. Tick, 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 tick. Metal stress. Something flexing wrong. Stop! Bird killed the engine. The truck settled and kept settling. The passenger side rear tire tilted inward at an angle that made Hammer's stomach drop. He dove underneath, pulled out the trouble light. The weld had cracked. Not completely, just a hairline fracture. But a hairline in metallurgy is a canyon waiting. He'd rushed it. The inner layer hadn't cooled enough before the middle layer. Thermal stress. The dissimilar metals expanding at different rates. Hammer crawled out, sat in the mud, put his head in his hands. 6 hours 40 minutes remained, and their only solution was broken. Vinny and Bird stood silent. We go back, Vinny said quietly. Tell Hayes we tried. Hammer didn't move. Bird looked at the crack, looked at Hammer, looked at his own hands. What if we do it again? Slower this time. No time, Vinny said. That took 2 hours. We do it again, we miss the deadline. Hammer lifted his head. His eyes were hard. My old man told me something when I was learning. He said the difference between a good welder and a great one isn't that the great one never makes mistakes. It's that when he makes a mistake, he knows exactly how to fix it. He stood, walked to the cracked weld, studied it like a doctor studying an X-ray. The inner layer cracked because it was under tension while outer layers cooled. Classic thermal stress. He pointed to a spot 6 inches from the crack. But look here, this section's solid, no fractures. He turned to them. We don't redo the whole weld. We reinforce the failure point. Add gusset plates here and here. Triangle bracing. Distribute stress across a wider area. The crack becomes irrelevant because the load path goes around it. You sure? No. But I'm sure that sitting here guarantees failure. He looked at Bird. Kid, you ever weld? Bird shook his head. You're about to learn. For 45 minutes, Hammer taught how to hold the rod, how to watch the puddle, how to move at a speed that built up metal without burning through. Bird's first attempts were ugly, globs of slag, porous beads like Swiss cheese. But Hammer didn't criticize, just corrected, adjusted angle, slowed movement. The metal will tell you when it's right. You just got to stop talking and listen. By the 10th attempt, Bird laid a bead that wasn't perfect, but was functional. That'll do, and Bird stood straighter. They fabricated gusset plates from 1/4-inch steel, triangular reinforcements bridging the crack. Hammer welded one side, while Bird, hands shaking but focused, welded the other. The smell of hot metal filled the cold air. The forest had gone silent, as if the trees were holding their breath. At 20-15 hours they finished. The repair looked like something built by ogres, rough, over-engineered, ugly as sin. But when Hammer tested it with a pipe wrench, using leverage that would crack a weak weld, nothing moved. Lower her down. They pulled the blocks. The truck settled. Both rear tires held true. No tilting, no cracking sounds. Bird, get in. Vinny, you too. We're testing this. Hammer took the wheel, started the engine, let it warm, put it in gear. The truck moved forward, smooth, steady. The wide tires compressed mud instead of cutting through. The truck floated. Hammer steered toward ground he knew was bad. Deep mud, the kind that swallowed the original truck. The Frankenstein GMC hit the muck and drove through it like pavement. The speedometer climbed. 10 miles per hour, 15, 20. Mud sprayed in rooster tails, but the truck kept moving, the wide aircraft tires doing exactly what physics predicted. Hammer felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years: hope. He drove in a wide circle, testing turns, acceleration, testing the welds under loads that would have killed a normal repair. Nothing broke. He brought the truck back. She'll do. Bird let out a whoop. Vinny laughed, pure relief. Hammer just pulled an unlit cigar from his pocket, looked at it, put it back. Not yet. Load up. We got a convoy to save. 1945 hours. 6 hours 15 minutes to midnight. They drove back toward the convoy, headlights off, navigating by moonlight. When they emerged onto the convoy road, every man stood to stare. The truck looked like a nightmare, wide, squat, brutal, with massive black tires that belonged on an airplane. Captain Hayes walked toward them, his bandaged arm held close to his body, his face pale but composed. Hammer climbed down, stood at attention. Hayes walked around the truck slowly, touched a tire, examined the welds. "This is a monstrosity, Sergeant." "Yes, sir." "A complete violation of regulations." "Yes, sir." Hayes was quiet. Behind him, men waited. Somewhere northeast, 5,000 soldiers counted their last bullets. Hayes pulled his field manual from his coat. That leather-bound book, his Bible, his shield. He opened it to a random page, read something, closed it, held it out to Hammer. Hammer didn't take it. "Keep it, sir. I think you're going to need it more than me." Hayes looked at the book, looked at Hammer. Something in his eyes changed. "No, Sergeant." "I don't think I will." He walked to the nearest mud puddle, dropped the book in, watched it begin to dissolve. Load ammunition, maximum capacity, departure at 2000 hours. "Sir, with your arm." "That's an order, Kowalski." Hayes paused. "And Sergeant, bring them home, all of them." "Yes, sir." They loaded the Frankenstein truck, 2 tons of 30 caliber ammunition, crates of 105mm shells, bandoliers, grenades, medical supply. But when they opened the 3rd ammunition crate, Vinny swore. "Hammer, look." Water damage. The crate had taken shrapnel from the earlier mortar fire, and rain had seeped in. Half the bandoliers were soaked, ruined. They checked the other crates. 2 more were compromised. Hammer did quick math. They'd lost maybe 30% of the small arms ammunition. "We load what's good," he said. "Move fast, we can make 2 trips." "Not enough time," Vinny said. "It's 12 miles one way. Even with this truck, that's 40 minutes each direction. Load time, we're looking at 3 hours for a round trip. By the time we get back, the 101st will already be in contact." Hammer looked at the damaged ammunition, looked at the good ammunition, looked at Vinny. "Then we make sure the first trip counts. Load every good round, every shell. We give them enough to hold until reinforcements arrive." Bird spoke up. "What if it's not enough?" Then we better drive fast. At 2,000 hours exactly, Bird started the engine. The Frankenstein truck rolled forward into darkness, carrying hope and ammunition and 3 men who'd stopped following rules. Behind them, Hayes stood watching until the taillights disappeared. Then he picked up his field manual from the mud puddle. It was already dissolving, pages turning to pulp. He left it there. The Frankenstein truck drove into darkness, carrying the weight of 5,000 lives. Bird gripped the wheel. The dashboard gauges glowed faint green, speedometer climbing, 20 miles per hour, 25. Faster than any truck had moved through this mud in 3 days. Hammer sat passenger, map across his knees. He'd marked the route in pencil. 12 miles. Might as well be 1,200. Vinnie rode topside, standing in the gun mount, hands gripping the .50 caliber Browning. The cold wind cut like razors. He didn't blink. The radio crackled, static. Then a voice so faint it might have been a ghost. Eagle actual. Ammunition critical. The voice died. Hammer looked at his watch. 20:45 hours. 5 hours 15 minutes to midnight. Faster! Bird pressed the accelerator. 30 miles per hour. The truck slid sideways through a turn, rear end drifting, but the wide tires caught, held, pulled them through. Bird was learning, fear burning off. What remained was something harder. Good, Hammer said. Just that word. Bird sat straighter. 20 minutes of ruined landscape scrolling past. Shattered trees, flooded craters, vehicle skeletons. Then the road got worse. The mud section appeared without warning. One moment terrible ground, the next hell's own swamp. The road had been a farm track once. Now it was a river of chocolate-colored sludge, 3 feet deep, stretching 200 yards ahead. Trees on both sides, no way around. One way, through. Stop! Bird braked. The truck settled, sinking 2 inches immediately. Hammer climbed out, took 3 steps into the mud. It grabbed his boots like living hands. He pushed a stick down. It disappeared past 4 feet. Any normal truck would sink to the axles and die here. But the Frankenstein truck wasn't normal. Hammer walked back, looked at the wide aircraft tires, did the math one more time in his head. 12 psi. Maybe 13. Low enough to float. Barely. We go through. Don't stop. Don't slow down. Momentum is everything. You hesitate, we die here. Bird's hands shook. I can't. Yes, you can. Hammer's voice was iron. You already did things tonight you didn't think you could do. This is just one more. Bird looked at him. 19 years old. Farm boy who'd never driven anything faster than a tractor. He took a breath, let it out slow. Hold on. Second gear. RPMs up. Dump the clutch. The Frankenstein truck lunged forward like a bull from a gate. They hit the mud at 30 miles per hour. The world became liquid chaos. Mud sprayed 50 feet high. The windshield went brown. Bird drove blind, steering by feel, by prayer, by the thin line between clutch and accelerator that meant life or death. The truck slewed sideways. The rear end swung out. For one terrible moment, they were perpendicular to the road, sliding broadside toward the trees. "Countersteer!" Hammer shouted. "Into the slide!" Bird spun the wheel. The wide tires caught something solid underneath. The truck straightened. Still moving, still floating. The engine screamed. The transmission howled. Every bolt shook with vibration that felt like the truck tearing itself apart. But they were moving forward. 100 yards. 150. Bird couldn't see, just kept his foot down and trusted the machine. The truck tilted. 15 degrees. 20. The passenger side sinking deeper. Hammer could hear the tire churning desperately. "Don't lift!" Bird kept the accelerator floored, the engine redlined. Something in the drivetrain made a sound like a wounded animal. Then the front wheels hit solid ground. The truck lurched, caught traction, pulled itself out like a drowning man grabbing a rope. The rear wheels followed, spraying mud in a final rooster tail. They were through. Bird let off the gas. The truck coasted to a stop. He killed the engine. Silence, except for the radiator hissing and mud dripping off the chassis. Bird sat frozen, hands still locked on the wheel. "Kid," Hammer's voice was gentle. You can let go now. Bird's hands unclenched, started shaking violently. He looked at them like they belonged to someone else. Vinny dropped down from the gun mount, face pale. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, I was sure we were dead. Hammer climbed out, walked around the truck, checked welds by flashlight, checked tires, checked every mounting bolt, everything held. He allowed himself one small smile. Mount up. We're not done. 21:15 hours. 3 hours 45 minutes to midnight. They drove on. The mechanical failure came at 22:45 hours. Hammer heard it first. A sound that shouldn't be there. A grinding, squealing protest from the right rear wheel. Stop! Now! Bird pulled over, killed the engine. Hammer was already out, trouble light in hand, diving under the truck. The wheel bearing on the right rear hybrid axle. Old German grease, inconsistent tolerances. Now it was cooking itself to death. He could smell it, hot metal, burning grease. The bearing cage was seizing. They had maybe 10 more miles before it welded itself solid. In this mud, a locked wheel meant a dead truck. What is it? Vinny called down. Bearings shot. We need to repack it, now. With what? We don't have bearing grease. In the distance, a sound. Faint, mechanical. They all heard it. Engines, multiple, German. Hammer looked at the cargo, looked at his own hands, black with oil. Vinny, you got that tin of bore cleaner for the 50 cal? Vinny produced a small tin of thick, viscous oil, maybe 8 ounces, not enough for a proper bearing repack, but enough to buy a few more miles. The engine sounds grew louder. A patrol, maybe a convoy, coming from the west, the same road. How long? Vinny asked, voice tight. 2 minutes. We don't have 2 minutes. Then give me 90 seconds and cover me. Vinny grabbed his carbine, climbed to the gun mount, scanned the darkness. The German engines were close now, maybe 500 yards. Hammer worked with desperate precision, jacked up the rear wheel, pulled the hub. The bearing was a disaster, pitted, scored, on the edge of catastrophic failure. He scooped out old grease with his fingers. The metal was so hot it burned. He didn't flinch. Packed in the new oil, working it into every race, every ball, praying it would hold. The engines were very close, maybe 300 yards. Bird stood beside the truck, carbine raised, watching Hammer work, watching the darkness, trying not to think about Mary and Catherine O'Malley growing up without their father. Hammer. Done. He dropped the jack. The truck settled. Go now. Bird started the engine, threw it in gear. They lurched forward. Headlights appeared in the fog behind them. Shouts in German. The sharp crack of rifle fire. Bullets snapped past. One punched through the canvas top. Another sparked off the tailgate. Vinny opened up with the 50 caliber. The Browning thundered, a sound like God clearing his throat. Tracers arced back into the darkness, red lines cutting through fog. The German headlights swerved. The firing stopped. They'd bought themselves a minute. Bird drove hard. The repacked bearing squealed but held. The truck bounced through ruts that would have killed the suspension on anything normal, but the Frankenstein truck wasn't normal. They pulled away. The German engines faded. For 3 miles they drove in silence. Just the engine, just the mud, just 3 men and a machine that refused to die. Then Vinny spoke from his position topside. Checkpoint ahead, 200 yards. Hammer looked up, saw the roadblock, saw the shapes of men, saw the distinctive profiles of German helmets. They'd driven straight into an ambush. The MG-42 opened fire before Bird could react. The sound was distinctive, like canvas ripping. Like the world's fastest zipper. 1,200 rounds per minute, a buzzsaw made of lead. The windshield exploded, glass sprayed everywhere. Bird ducked, still holding the wheel, driving blind. Bullets hammered the hood, the cab, the cargo bed. The canvas top shredded. Ammunition crates splintered. Vinny swung the 50 cal toward the muzzle flashes and returned fire. The Browning spoke in deep, measured thumps, slower than the MG-42, but heavier, each round a sledgehammer. Hard left, Hammer shouted. Bird spun the wheel. The truck drifted sideways, tires sliding through mud, using momentum like a weapon. They slid past the first machine gun nest, so close Hammer could see the German gunner's face, white and shocked. A second MG-42 opened up from the right. This one had the range. Bullets walked up the right side of the truck, punched through the door, through the seat, through Vinny. The sound he made was small, surprised, like someone had pushed him unexpectedly. Then he fell. He dropped from the gun mount into the truck bed, landing hard on the ammunition crates. His hands went to his chest. Blood, black in the darkness, spread across his uniform. The bullet had hit him center mass, right side of the chest, lung, maybe heart. "Vinny!" Bird screamed. "Drive!" Hammer roared. "Drive!" But Hammer was already moving. He climbed into the back, grabbed the .50 caliber, swung it toward the German positions, opened fire. The Browning bucked in his hands. He walked the tracers across the tree line. Suppressive fire, keeping their heads down. "Bird, hard right, now!" Bird spun the wheel. The truck fishtailed wildly, but the wide tires held. They slid past the second gun position, so close that spent brass casings from the MG-42 rained down on the hood. Then they were past, into the dark safety of the forest beyond. "Keep driving!" Hammer yelled. 200 yards, then stop!" Bird drove, tears streaming down his face, hands locked on the wheel, following orders because that was all he knew how to do. At 200 yards, Hammer grabbed the wheel from behind. "Stop, here." Bird stopped, killed the engine, scrambled out, climbed into the back. Vinny lay among the ammunition crates, breathing in short, wet gasps. Each breath bubbled, pink foam on his lips. His face was pale, too pale. "Mary," he whispered. His hand found his breast pocket, pulled out a photograph, creased, worn, his wife and 2 daughters. "Tell Mary I tried to come home." "You're going to tell her yourself," Bird said, his voice breaking. "We'll get you to a medic. They'll—" Vinny's hand found Bird's, gripped it, surprisingly strong. "Listen." Each word cost him. "Mary Jr. She's 7. Wants to be a teacher. Catherine, 5. Scared of thunder. You tell them." He coughed. "Blood. You tell them their daddy wasn't scared. Not of anything. Not even this." "Vinny, no. Promise me, you'll tell them." "I promise." And Hammer. Vinny's eyes found the sergeant, standing at the tailgate, face carved from stone. "The truck. Does it still run?" "The truck's fine, Vinny." "Good." Another wet breath. "Mary's going to kill me for being late, for dinner." He laughed. It turned into a cough. More blood. His grip on Bird's hand loosened. "Tell the girls I love—" He didn't finish. The hand went slack. The eyes stayed open, staring at something far away that Bird couldn't see. Vinny O'Malley. 34 years old, Boston, Irish. Husband to Mary, father to Mary Jr. and Catherine. Gone. Bird knelt there, holding a dead man's hand, shaking. Hammer climbed into the bed, gently pulled Bird's hand free, closed Vinny's eyes, took off his own coat and laid it over Vinny's face, placed the photograph of Mary and the girls on his chest. "We gotta go," Hammer said quietly. "We can't leave him. We're not leaving him. He's coming with us. He's coming all the way." Hammer's voice was steel wrapped in sorrow. "He got us this far. He's going to see it finished." Bird looked up, tears cutting tracks through the mud on his face. "I can't drive anymore. I can't." "Yes, you can." Hammer pulled him to his feet. "Because if we stop now, 5,000 men die. And Vinny died for nothing. You want that?" Bird shook his head. "Then get in the driver's seat. I'll man the gun. We finish this. For Vinny. For Mary and the girls. For the 101st. For everyone counting on us." Bird climbed into the cab. His hands found the wheel, found the key, started the engine. Hammer took position on the .50 caliber, one hand on the grip, the other touching the coat covering his friend. From his pocket he pulled out the unlit cigar he'd been saving, placed it gently in Vinny's still hand. "For Mary," he said quietly. "You were thinking about her. Until the end." "Go," he said to Bird. They went. At 03:45 hours on November 18th, 1944, a truck that shouldn't exist rolled into the 101st Airborne perimeter. It looked like it had driven through hell. One headlight smashed, hood riddled with bullet holes, canvas top in shreds, right rear tire flat but still holding shape, still rolling on those impossible reinforced sidewalls, and riding low with ammunition and one dead hero. The sentries almost shot them before someone recognized the American markings under all the mud. "Hold fire! Hold fire! They're ours!" The truck rolled to a stop in the center of the perimeter. Bird killed the engine. Sat there, unable to move. Soldiers swarmed, thin men with hollow eyes and empty bandoliers. They'd been counting bullets for hours, knowing each one might be their last. They tore into the cargo like starving animals finding food. Ammunition crates passed hand to hand down the line. Bandoliers, shells, medical supplies. Life measured in brass and cordite. A young lieutenant ran up to the cab, saw Hammer climbing down stiffly, covered in mud and blood that wasn't his. "Sergeant, what is this thing? Where did you—" "Doesn't matter." Hammer's voice was rough, used up. "You got your ammunition, use it." He walked to the back, lifted Vinny's body, carried him like a father carrying a sleeping child, laid him down gently on a clear spot of ground, took off his helmet and placed it on Vinny's chest. The soldiers unloading ammunition stopped, grew quiet, removed their helmets. Bird stood beside Hammer, crying openly now, not caring who saw. Hammer didn't cry, couldn't. All the tears had been burned out of him years ago. He just stood there, a 52-year-old mechanic from Chicago who'd broken every rule and saved 5,000 lives and lost one friend in the process. The math didn't balance. It never did. A captain approached, saluted. "Sergeant, I don't know how you got here, but you saved us. The German attack starts in 15 minutes. Without this ammunition—" "I know." Hammer looked at Vinny's still form. "We know." Behind them, Captain Hayes arrived with the rest of the convoy. He'd followed their trail, brought the other trucks through using the path the Frankenstein had proven possible. He found Hammer and Bird sitting in the ruined cab. Hayes didn't say anything, just saluted, held it. Hammer returned it slowly. The German attack came at 0400 hours exactly. It broke against 5,000 Americans who had ammunition to spare. By noon, the line held. By evening, the Germans withdrew. And somewhere in the mud of the Hurtgen forest, a truck with aircraft wheels sat quietly rusting, having done the impossible for one impossible night. 70 years later. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. The museum was quiet. Sunday afternoon. Families walking past displays of tanks and artillery. Children asking questions their parents couldn't answer. In the back corner, under spotlights, sat a truck that looked wrong. GMCCCKW body. But the rear wheels were massive, smooth, obviously from something that flew. Welds like scar tissue connected American steel to German engineering. The plaque read, "Improvised Recovery Vehicle, Hurtgen Forest, November 1944. Designer, Master Sergeant Jack Kowalski. Driver, Private Leo Bird Brennan. KIA, Staff Sergeant Vincent O'Malley. Saved 4,847 American lives." An old man stood before it, leaning on a cane. 89 years old. Still had the same smooth face that couldn't grow a beard 70 years ago, just weathered now. Bird. His grandson stood beside him, 16, bored until he saw the truck. "Grandpa, what is that thing?" Bird didn't answer right away. His hand reached out, touched one of the aircraft tires. The rubber was still there, still holding its shape after 7 decades. The moment his fingers made contact, it hit him. Not memory, something deeper. The smell of cordite and burning oil, the feel of the steering wheel vibrating in his hands. Vinny's voice from above, "Hard left, kid!" Hammer's gruff command, "Drive, don't think, just drive." The museum disappeared. For just a moment, He was 19 again, terrified, alive. Then it faded. He was an old man again, safe, standing in a museum. "That's a miracle," Bird said finally. His voice was thick. "Built by a man who knew machines better than people, who saved my life, who taught me that sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to do what's right." "Did you really drive this?" "Once, for 12 miles that felt like 12,000, through mud that wanted to eat us, through German fire that tried to kill us." Bird smiled, small and sad, when it mattered most. "Were you scared?" Bird paused, terrified. "But there was a sergeant with me, Jack Kowalski. We called him Hammer. He wasn't scared of anything. Made you feel like if he said it would work, it would work." His voice caught. "And there was another man, Staff Sergeant Vincent O'Malley. He had a wife, Mary, 2 daughters." Bird reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small, worn notebook, leather-bound, held together with rubber bands. "What's that?" his grandson asked. "After the war, I tried to find out how many men we saved that night. Took me 40 years. He opened the notebook, page after page of names, handwritten. 4,847 names. Every man who was at that perimeter, every man who got to go home because we delivered ammunition." He turned pages slowly. "I wrote to all of them, or their families, told them about Vinny, told them about Hammer, told them about a truck that shouldn't have worked but did." His grandson stared at the notebook. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of families." Bird looked at the boy. "Those men had children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. There are doctors, teachers, engineers, Marines, artists walking around today who exist because 70 years ago, a mechanic from Chicago refused to follow the manual. The man who built this, what happened to him? Went back to Chicago after the war, opened a garage, fixed cars for 40 years, never talked about this night, never asked for recognition." Bird smiled, remembering. "Died in 1998, working under a Buick, wrench in his hand. That's exactly how he would have wanted it." A voice spoke from behind them. "Mr. Brennan?" Bird turned. 2 elderly women stood there, one maybe 70, the other 65, both with tears in their eyes. The older one stepped forward. "I'm Mary Callahan. I was Mary O'Malley, and this is my sister, Catherine." Bird's cane clattered to the floor. His hand went to his mouth. "You're Vinny's daughters," Mary's voice broke. "We've been looking for you for 20 years. The museum called us when they found out you were coming." She held out something, a small wooden box. "The army returned this to our mother after the war. Father's wedding ring, his dog tags. And this." She opened the box. Inside, wrapped in velvet, was a cigar, unlit, 70 years old. "Mother said a sergeant named Kowalski told her that father was thinking about her, until the end, that he wasn't scared." Mary's eyes were wet. "We wanted to say thank you, for being with him, for bringing him home, for keeping his promise." Bird took the box. His hands shook. "He talked about you, both of you. Mary, he said you wanted to be a teacher. Catherine, he said you were scared of thunder." Mary nodded. "I taught for 40 years, elementary school." Catherine smiled through tears. "I got over the thunder, became a storm chaser, meteorologist, because I wanted to understand the thing that scared me." "He'd be proud," Bird whispered. "So proud." They stood there, the 3 of them, in front of the ugly hybrid truck, connected by one night 70 years ago when the impossible happened. Bird's grandson watched his grandfather cry for the first time in his life, watched him hug 2 strangers who weren't strangers at all, and understood finally what his history teacher meant when she talked about the cost of freedom. Later, after Mary and Catherine had left, after Bird had composed himself, he and his grandson walked toward the exit. The boy paused at the truck one more time. "Grandpa, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "You said at the beginning that the heaviest sound in war was silence. Is that still true?" Bird stopped, looked back at the Frankenstein truck, sitting silent in its spotlight. "I was 19 when I said that. Scared. didn't know anything about anything. He put his hand on his grandson's shoulder. The heaviest sound in war is silence. That part's true. The silence after Vinny fell. The silence when I thought we'd fail. The silence of 5,000 men holding their breath, waiting for ammunition that might not come. He paused. But the sweetest sound? That's something I learned later. The sweetest sound is a promise kept. A father's voice telling his daughters he loves them, even after 70 years. An engine that refuses to die. And the grinding of rubber on mud, carrying hope to men who had none left. They walked out into the Maryland sunshine. Behind them, in the museum's quiet darkness, the Frankenstein truck sat waiting. Ugly, impossible, real. A monument to the moment when mechanics became heroes, when farm boys became men, when breaking the rules became the only rule that mattered. And somewhere, in the space between memory and metal, 3 voices still echoed. Hammer. Drive. Don't think, just drive. Vinny. Tell them I wasn't scared. Bird. I promise. The promise kept. For 70 years. Forever.